Hello again, and welcome to video 1.4 of our section Scraping with Selenium. In our previous videos, we learned the syntax of CSS selectors and how to use the developer tools to figure out what selectors to use. Now we can move over to Python and begin writing a web scraping script using the Selenium module. In this video, we're first going to install a WebDriver, which we'll control using Python with the help of something called the Selenium module, which we'll also install. Then we'll get our hands dirty with a practical and hands-on example of web scraping a website. A WebDriver is commonly used as a tool for testing web applications. If you build an app, instead of clicking every single button and making sure it all works correctly, you can write code to simulate all sorts of clicks and entries into the browser to make sure that it doesn't break. For us, this is a very handy tool because it lets us write Python code that can tell a browser what to do, and more importantly for our applications, tell it to grab the contents of a website. For the WebDriver, in this tutorial, we'll be using something called the Chrome driver, which uses the Chrome browser and can be downloaded at this site here. To install the Chrome driver, you can follow that link, or you can search Chrome driver WebDriver. And the first link should be a link to Google, and we can install the latest release. And here we're going to be using Windows. So let's create a folder there called Demo. And I'm just going to take this, extract it all here. And if we open this, there should be a chromedriver.exe, which I'm just going to put in our demo folder. And now we have our Chrome driver. Now we're going to have to install Selenium, and this will be slightly different depending on what version of Python you're running and what operating system you're on. But I will be doing it like this. I'm going to open a PowerShell window, and then I'm going to be using the bash environment. And then you'll be doing something like this. You probably won't need to write sudo unless you're on Ubuntu or using the bash system. But then you're going to write something like pip or pip3 install Selenium. Now that we've done that, we can start to write a Python program. I'm going to be using Python for Visual Studio. You don't need to be using this environment at all. I'm just using it because I can use the autocomplete and the syntax highlighting in the command shell, which I think will look good and it'll make it a little bit easier to watch. So first thing we're going to do is go from Selenium, import WebDriver. And now we can get our Python code to take hold of the browser using this. WebDriver.chrome, and then you need to pass the path to your chromedriver.exe. I have it in the same project directory, so I can just write chromedriver.exe, and it opens my Chrome. So I'm just going to close this, and now rerun this, but assigning it to a variable called browser. Now we can start controlling a browser through our Python code. We can navigate to a website like so, browser.get. I'm just going to go to Google, and you can see it navigates to the website. And now with this browser, we can do lots of things. You can see you can go back, you can close, you can add cookies, change the URL, lots of things. Just for instance, one of the things we can do is execute a script, which means we can insert JavaScript into our page. So we can go alert, hello, and this will run that JavaScript. And you can see here we get this pop-up. We can even take screenshots of the current page. But most importantly, we have those CSS selector queries we discussed before. And using these, we can select elements and mess around with them. So for instance, let's select the Google input text box. So I can see here that the ID of this input is lst-ib. So let's close this. And now we can set a variable input and go browser.find element by CSS selector. And you can see we have other options. We can do XPaths. We can just enter a class name, so on and so forth. We also have the options of using find element or find elements. You can see that we can select elements by class name or elements by name. But for the most part, we're going to stick with just using CSS selectors and find elements by CSS selector, because this gives us more power and we can do all the other things just using CSS selectors. If we use find element by CSS selector and the selector corresponds to multiple tags, it will just return the first it finds. So let's do that. Find element by CSS selector. And we have an ID, so I'm going to put in a hashtag. And let's close that. And now we have the input tag in that variable. And again, using the autocomplete, I just want to show you what we can do with this element. So, we can click it, we can clear it, we can find child elements using these queries again. And we can also simulate text input by going input.send keys. Example text. And you can see that simulates entering that Google query. Then we can clear the text box using input.clear. So we have quite a bit of power here to tell the browser what to do. And so now let's tell it to get some data for us. We can start by changing this to go to reddit.com. And perhaps I want to start by getting a list of all the posts on the front page. Well, like before, if I inspect element, we can see that each of these are probably going to include this class title. So maybe we can start by using that. So let's put all the titles in a variable called titles. And we're going to say browser.find elements. And notice we're using elements now because we want all of the elements. By CSS selector. So the class is title, so we go put .title. Now let's take a look at the text and all those elements using Python. So we can go t.text for t in titles. And you can see this generates a list. And let's debug with the console now because I can see that this isn't quite right. This has grabbed my subreddits, which isn't the first post. So I'm not entirely confident that this is working. So we're going to switch to the Chrome developer tools for a second. Recall that Python's browser.findElements selector is the same as doing those $2 we discussed in the previous video. So now we can try that again using this. We go .titles, or .title rather, to select all the elements with a class title. And let's see what we get here. Now it looks like this element on the top here has that class, as well as I think there's probably these elements down at the bottom. They also have that class. So this isn't exactly the query that we want to be using. Furthermore, it looks like there's both a paragraph and an anchor tag associated with each title. So we're getting doubles. Well, we can refine our query by saying we only want tags that are links by putting an a dot title in our query. So let's try that now. Now it appears that we're not getting those doubles, and we're not getting that original node from the top. And now we've also filtered out those other unnecessary tags at the bottom. But let's take it a step further. It looks like this class outbound specifies whether or not the link stays on Reddit or whether or not it goes to a different website altogether. Let's say we only want external links, so we want ones with the class outbound. Well, we can extend this to say A's with the class title and also A's with the class outbound. So now it requires both. Now we can see we're only getting external links. Now it's possible at this point that you're thinking, well, if we can do this all in the browser like this, why even use Python? But the problem is that with JavaScript like this, we can't continue to run the code across different pages. So let's say we wanted to get all these links, and then we wanted to click the next page and run it again. Well, we couldn't. However, we can do that in our Python script. So let's start working on that now. So I'm going to move some of this Python code in the shell into a script. And just to test this is working, let's run it. You can see it goes to Reddit, and then it runs the script and returns just the titles of the external links to us. But let's say we wanted to get the title text for the first 3 pages, not just the first page. Well, now we'll tell the browser to press the next page button and repeat our code. If we again open Reddit, and we scroll down to look at the next page button, and we inspect element on that button. So you can see that this link doesn't have an ID or a class or something clear that we can index on. However, its parent, this span, does. It uses next button. So let's just double check that that's what we want. You can see this returns an array, but it only returns one element. And it's that button we want. So if we say next button, and then within it we want the A, now we have that link. So let's use this query. So now instead of printing the titles, I'm going to get that next button. I'm going to say next equals browser.find element by CSS selector. Now on this tag next, we can call the click method to simulate clicking that link. So I'm going to run this and just see if it works. So it goes to reddit.com and then it clicks the next link. Now let's rerun this, getting the first 3 pages. So what this code should do is it should get all the titles text from the first 3 pages. So let's run it. We navigate to Reddit. We go to the bottom of the page, we click the link. We go to the bottom of the page, click the link. And then once again, we go to the bottom of the page and we click the link. And now to make sure that this worked, I'm going to go for post in titles text print post. And you can see that's the titles for all of the top 3 pages. Now you can see that that code ran quite fast and it loaded a lot of pages quite quickly. You can imagine increasing this script so that it does that for the first, let's say, 100 pages. But this is where we run to a bit of an ethical problem. So I'm going to stop here, and that'll lead us into our next video. In the next video, we're going to discuss the ethics and legality of web scraping and what your responsibilities are.